we're going to be here with our next guest soon. If you haven't noticed, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
Fam, and a member of the team who does such great work is really broke some stories. And I mean, we were speaking about Nancy Pelosi today.
Yeah.
We've talked about We Feed Them, how she is such a phony, the person she really is. She really is, I think, worse than Mitch McConnell. Because at least Mitch is who he is.
I don't know.
No, she acts like she's the friend of the worker and whatnot, and she turns around. We feed them. We feed them. Like, what kind of shit is that?
Yeah.
We feed them.
Yeah, she's pretty bad.
Well, huh? What's that? I didn't hear you, buddy.
I said, I don't even think the comparison needs to be made. They're both bad.
Well, I mean, he just means, like, in terms of he's blatantly who he is, and she's, like, trying to pretend she's something else, which requires a certain level of psychopathy that is, like, way more insidious. That is insidious.
Can do more damage.
Like, yeah, I mean, I think Mitch McConnell is terrible in other ways.
He's awful.
I think they're both awful. I think they're both terrible. I think they both exist because of each other. They enable each other.
Yeah.
And you know, they are the ones that put that tit for tat kind of relationship, right? So Nancy Pelosi, as Robbie was one of the first people to talk about this and break this. We've mentioned her money, you know, her insidious money moves before that could be considered a conflict of interest, could be considered something that is illegal, but she finds the loopholes in the law to get away with it. And we wanted to bring Robbie on because TYT did not give him credit. They gave somebody else credit. Ryan Grimm of The Intercept, same thing. These people steal consistently from Robbie. I see it all the time. And Robbie's somebody that needs to be amplified because he does amazing work, these deep dives with all the receipts. And basically, a committee that was controlled by Pelosi blocked an amendment to prohibit these members of Congress and their spouses from trading corporate stocks. But Nancy Pelosi bought $10 million in Microsoft stocks before that. So we have Robbie, or as Pasta calls him, Roblito, aka Robbie Receipts,
because he always brings the receipts, fam.
Yeah. So he's here with us today. Welcome, Robbie.
Hey guys, what's going on? I'm glad to be back once again. You guys are doing great work, so I'm glad you can make some time in your schedule so I could hop in here for a few minutes.
Yeah, I guess you're breaking the stigma, the curse that you talked about last time. That, oh man, I broke through. I'm finally on the Convo Couch. Well, now you're on twice in a short amount of time, buddy. So hey, I don't want to hear nothing.
Everything is forgiven, guys. 100%.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But man, really, to tell you the truth, like, you know, I heard somebody make a comment the other day about you and saying like every single progressive should be using Robbie's receipts on their show right now if they really gave a damn about what's going on. The way he just kind of puts it for you in black and white. You have some amazing tweets we're going to go over. You talk about some amazing things. But you did say the other day that since Joe Biden has taken office, there's been an amping up of lobbyists now that have been just running all over the place. Can you give us a little insight to what you mean about what has been taking place from the lobbyist perspective since Joe's been sworn in?
Yeah, well, sure. So since, you have to also take into the account that it's not just Joe. We have a brand new Congress, right? It's an equally divided Senate, lots of new players in the game. But as you have with any changing of the guard, especially at a presidential administration, as soon as the new guys are in, there's a bunch of people, right, that maybe used to work with Joe Biden back in the day, that, have all of these old connections, right? And they want to exercise those connections as soon as possible. As soon as Joe Biden takes office, everybody that is a lobbyist that has any kind of relationship with him whatsoever, not only are they rushing literally to sign new clients, but they're advertising their old ties to Joe Biden and to former and current congressmen and women. And that's just the way it goes. I think that since January 1st, there's been I think we're like around a number like 1,350 new lobbying registrations filed with the U.S. Senate, which is something I look through every day because, sometimes you do find that, these big corporations are really and blatantly trying to draw on that influence whenever they're signing people that used to be like a chief of staff for Joe Biden back in his Senate days and stuff like that. Like, you're obviously hiring these people for the specific reason of taking advantage of those ties. So yeah, lobbying right now is kind of where the first quarterly amounts are starting to come in. You're starting to see some of the numbers that companies are paying. There's nothing huge out there right now, but it's just kind of like, it's just something to keep an eye on. Like you see Salesforce using former like Nancy Pelosi's former confidants or advisors or staff or chiefs of staff and stuff like that to lobby the government for government contracts. Well, it also doesn't help or doesn't hurt the fact rather that not only is like say Salesforce, not only are they a San Francisco based company, which is right in Pelosi's district, but she also holds like up to $5 million in investments in Salesforce. So I mean, you start to get to why, I'm sure we'll discuss this in a minute, as to why congressmen and women holding individual stocks is a huge problem, because all it does is add to the conflict of interest. Because say Salesforce does wind up getting a nice juicy contract from the US government, well, the first thing anybody's going to look at is, are the people in charge profiting from Salesforce? And in this case, yes, they are. So you just always got to look like that.
Yeah, so why don't you give us a little bit of insight into what happened when Paul Pelosi bought the $10 million in stocks after her committee, Nancy's committee, blocked this amendment to prohibit the members of Congress and their spouses from trading corporate stocks. Because you have the tweet right here where you talk about the financial disclosures of Paul and the $10 million worth of Microsoft, and how they purchased also $3 million more of global investment from Lewis and Bernstein, and up to $1 million in Roblox.
Yeah, shout out to a kid's game, Roblox. Yes, even Nancy Pelosi is trying to get in on the action with that. So yeah, so shout out to actual. I think Sludge was one that reported the clause being removed from the recent legislation. I actually didn't know about that until they brought it to my attention. I think just yesterday. So shout out to them on that, because had I known that, I would have included that in the report as well. So I mean, it's shame on me for missing that, because whenever you take into the account, like, because my report was based on, hey, obviously Nancy Pelosi has a history of dropping, six-figure investments in big companies on the regular basis. That's why anytime I see, or anybody that's doing what I do sees the Nancy Pelosi name come across the wire as far as financial transactions go, it's going to be something good. It's going to be something big, because it usually is. And this was no different. As you mentioned, I broke the story of how Nancy Pelosi and her husband purchased up to $10 million in Microsoft. And that purchase came just weeks before Microsoft was awarded a massive $22 billion contract by the Pentagon to manufacture augmented reality headsets for the U.S. military. But then you add in on top. So, I mean, even then, like, Microsoft stock jumped on that news, right? Whenever Pelosi and them made the transactions on that date, the stock price for Microsoft was around $230. It's now sitting, well, last time I checked, which was like, I think a day or two ago, it was like at $255. So that's a considerable profit already. And then you think about the fact that Pelosi was personally involved in the stripping of a clause that would, basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, because I don't have it in front of me, but it wasn't the clause saying that the representatives would have to move all of their assets either into like a blind trust or liquidate them.
Yeah.
Wasn't that what it was saying?
Yeah, they would have to get rid of them 100%.
Right.
And their spouses. So basically it would have applied to her.
Absolutely. Yes, because Paul Pelosi is the money mover, right? Of the two. He's a hedge fund manager, he's a very successful one at that. And when you have those connections, like, how couldn't you be? But be that as it may, yeah. So whenever you take the fact that with the contract, like, Microsoft was discussing that contract not just for weeks, but for probably months. They've gotten other big contracts from the U.S. government recently. I know last year that they get the election software contract, and then earlier this year they got another one for like $10 billion. I can't remember the specifics of for what that was for. I feel like it was something with COVID-19 related. But either way, I mean, these are discussions that obviously Nancy Pelosi is privy to. You would be bonkers to think that she doesn't know what's being discussed about stuff like that. She's the Speaker of the freaking House. Like, she's not just some random congresswoman. She's intimately involved in all of these major discussions. And And then you add the fact that she was personally involved in stripping that clause out of the bill. It just it looks absolutely terrible. But here's the thing, guys. Can we call it insider trading? No, we can't, because Congress has made it perfectly legal for them to do this.
Yeah.
So when people ask, and you see the meme on the internet all the time, right? How, judging by the salary that Nancy Pelosi gets paid, how has she exploded to like a $114 million net worth off of a congresswoman's salary? It's really easy. She's showing you how. She shows you how every time she files a financial disclosure and says, hey, I just put $5 million into company A, company B, and then you see how she's made all this money. I mean, her investments in Microsoft have made her a shit ton of money. When I broke the story last October that that her husband had bought 5,000 shares of CrowdStrike,
Yeah.
by the time that disclosure was even filed with the U.S. government, they had turned a huge profit on it. And it's time after time. I think there was a story a few months ago that she and her husband had bought a bunch of Tesla right before the bill came out, or the plan came out, to really invest in the electric vehicle market and all that kind of stuff. She's always perfectly timing these transactions. Yeah. And so when you wonder how she grew her net worth to the way it is, that's exactly how. She's playing the market like a champ, guys. It's fantastic. Like, you or I would probably get the feds called on us by like how good her timing is, but with our government officials, it's just business as usual, which is really disheartening, which is why they shouldn't be allowed to own stocks.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we still got to call it insider trading, though. Like Rob, like you said, we still got to call it insider trading. It's just legal. You know what I'm saying? Right. They just made it legal, and that's something that's really disgusting. And Nancy Pelosi is also at the helm of that, of making sure that they can continue to get insider trading info. I mean, talk about CrowdStrike. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, but we can't call it that because they made it legal. So insider trading is supposed to stand for something that is illegal. You know what I mean? So they weaponize this all the time. So you can't even refer to, oh, no, that's not true. That this is what we're doing this differently. And that's how they get away with it, which is even more enraging.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead, Pasta. It's legal for them, for the elites, to steal from the poor. I mean, look what they just did with the Wall Street bet shit. You know what I'm saying? And every way you look at it, the people up top just screw the people on the bottom. And the CrowdStrike thing for me was just crazy too as well, because it was a double whammy. Here's a company that sucks, right? That provided, they use false information. Adam Schiff was talking about them all the time. Meanwhile, they kind of just obfuscated the whole Russiagate narrative. That's where it came from. So it was a double whammy. But let's also talk about Nancy's campaign funds too, because you made a tweet over here. It said, FEC News, Nancy Pelosi's victory fund raised $6.3 million in Q1, mostly from DNC mega donors like Senator Waters, Super PAC funder Carla Jurvetson, Project Lincoln donor Ron Conway, and Bain Capitals. Everybody loves Bain Capitals. John Levine, right? And the committee sent $4 million to the DCC, which is another way DCC gets their money all dirty, and they just the DCCC, 500,000 K to her PAC, and 366,000 to her campaign. How does she escape scrutiny with all these dirty donors, being a Democrat?
Oh, because she's a corporate Democrat. And everybody looks at corporate Democrats, including progressive media. They look at corporate Democrats and they view them in the same light as the GOP. Would you really expect anybody to report that's a GOP senatorial candidate or GOP speaker or whoever was taking corporate money or hedge fund capital money? It wouldn't surprise you. And look, Nancy Pelosi is absolutely like the most corporate of corporate Democrats. And she has a fundraising Goliath. And look, you can expect to see a lot more where that came from as we go through 2021, but especially once we get into 2022. Guys, we're about to go into the most and I know we say this every time, but this is about to be the most expensive midterms by far. Yeah. And look, I just reported today that the DCCC are already getting like 6-figure bundled contributions from lobbyists already. And so the war chests are being stopped now. And you mentioned Carla Jurvetson, right?
Yep.
She's a doctor. People remember the Persist PAC, right? From when Senator Warren was running for president. She just overnight, it had a super PAC pop up in her name. And it was just like buying $14 million worth of ads overnight, just like that. Well, it was almost completely funded by Ms. Jurvetson here, Dr. Jurvetson, I guess to be specific. Ron Conway was one of the biggest donors to Project Lincoln during its early stages before it turned into the massive grifting machine that it actually became. Conway was one of the early birds to get in on Project Lincoln. And, look, there's other, like, you look down the list on that, on the donations, like J.J. Abrams, Barbara Streisand, lots of Hollywood elite, people that's Pelosi's crowd, right?
Yeah.
So here's what's going to happen. Nancy Pelosi's Victory Fund is one of the most successful joint fundraising committees that the DCCC has. So what, and that's funny, we can kind of tie this into that recent story about AOC, about how she, basically gave $160,000 to a bunch of different establishment Democrat candidates. So what Nancy Pelosi, and here's the thing, here's the issue I had with that story, and because most of those candidates are all going to take money from Nancy Pelosi, and they're not going to care about it one bit, and it's going to come through the Nancy Pelosi Victory Fund or the DCCC, which shares. Look, Nancy Pelosi is going to share her money with the DCCC, and they're going to disperse that around, which is why our campaign finance system is really, really messed up. The more I've been looking at it, because it's like, oh well, candidate A doesn't take money from lobbyists, or candidate A doesn't take money from defense contractors or pharma executives, but they do take money from the DCCC. Well, who do you think the DCCC takes money from?
Yeah, no shit.
All of those things, saying, so if you take money from the DCCC, you are taking money from all of the worst kinds of people, all of the corporate mega donors. And look, this is the first quarter of a brand new election cycle. And these numbers are already high, like 6.8 million or $6.3 million in the first 3 months of even for Nancy Pelosi, that's a lot of money. Given that the election's still 2 years away, just about. So it's not good. And by the way, for anybody watching that thinks that HR1 is going to solve any of this at all, it won't. If anything, it's going to explode the problem. Small donors are going to get amplified. Great. But the FEC just raised donation thresholds across the board. If you would have applied the 6-to-1 match to Bernie Sanders' campaign in the last election, he'd had $1 billion campaign, and he still would not have won. Which means that basically we're not going to be getting money anywhere close to being out of politics. We're just going to be dumping a hell of a lot more money into politics. But what was interesting, guys, and I want to hear what your take about this is. So apparently that 6-to-1 match was going to come from a fund that they basically, apparently we just have some massive fund of money sitting around, completely comprised of white collar criminal fines and corporate fines and stuff like that. And we're just going to fund all of these these match donations through this pool. But you can't have health care, and you can't get your student loans taken care of, and you can't get a $2,000 check. So what the hell? You know what I mean? Like, I don't see look, money does make the election world go round, but do you guys think if Bernie Sanders was able to raise like another $600,000 another like 500 million or $400 million, do you really think that would have won him an election?
No,
I don't.
No,
because it's not about that.
No, it's not about that. Yeah, it's about the fact that they can move everything around and make it so they're always on top.
Yeah.
So you end up losing, and like that, HR1 also hurts the third parties too.
Yeah, that's
it's really bad, and it does absolutely very little for anything regarding voting. It's such a bullshit bill, and I hate the fact that progressives and all these journalists, like including people on The Intercept, are promoting it like it's like the last coming of Jesus, like the second coming of Jesus. Like it's
Right.
like supposed to save just everybody's faith in the democratic system and in voting, while simultaneously crushing third parties, crushing any insurgent from raising money. Like it's really bad.
I think that's the thing that really bothers me most about HR1 is not the fact that they're going to match the high price funds for the Democratic and Republican Party and give them more avenues to do so to raise even unlimited amounts of money. It's the fact that they've taken away from a chance from a third party. They raised their threshold by almost times 5 for them to get there, making it almost impossible in certain areas where they can get a few funds. So not only does it just allow the big dogs to make more money unchecked coming out of our tax funds and everything like that, it more than it handcuffs the third parties, which is awful as well in HR1. HR1 sucks. So
yeah, and not to get too far off track, guys, because I know your time is limited, but while we're on the subject, really quickly, there's a lot of false information, or a lot of people are being disingenuous again about HR1, talking about how it is going to get dark money out of politics, which is simply not true. And while we're on the subject, there is the loophole in the bill, which is the exact same loophole they already use in the nonprofit industry, which basically says if you're worried about threats or harassment, aka getting dragged through the mud in the press, that's basically what that means. If you're scared of being reported on, then you can tell us and you still won't have to disclose. And even if they did, there are things called donor advised funds, guys, that you can donate your money to. And whenever you direct them, whoever you donate to, whatever institution that you have the fund with, whenever you direct them to make a donation to a nonprofit, the nonprofit is going to get the donation in your institution's name, not yours. So that's how dark money is now being funded. It started in 2020. It's going to get even bigger. There's so many loopholes in HR1.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the politicians, the way they sell it, I mean, you look at the D-Trip that we're talking about. Like, I remember Harvey Rauda talking about it. The D-Trip gets it right sometimes. They get it wrong sometimes. So, yeah, they got it wrong over there, but sometimes they'll get it right. So, they already have a way of framing the mechanisms to hide the money in the donations. So they're just going to do more of the same. If they got away with it before, they'll get away with it again,
Yeah, they're writing their own rules.
Yeah, pretty much.
So you also had this that you posted on April 9th about Biden's pick to lead NASA. And he was the former Senator Bill Nelson, who served on the advisory board for defense company Lockheed Martin, as well as Relativity Space, who 3D prints nothing other than rockets. Relativity's investors include Mark Cuban, former CAA executive Michael Kives, and TYT board member Sean Colo. Hey, shout out to TYT,
Michael
independent
Kives.
media, home of the progressives.
Yeah. Hey, look, I mean, it's a small world, isn't it? Look, so for one thing, that's news to me. Like, whenever I reported that, here's where I was coming from on that. I mean, it's obviously, I always like as soon as we get a new disclosure for somebody in Biden's administration, I think it's imperative that we all get to see it, so we know where this person's money is, where it's at, who it's invested in, stuff like that. But then you start looking at, like, are they even qualified for the job? I'm sorry, like, I'm not a historian on Bill Nelson, but as far as I'm concerned, is he like an MIT level scientist or one of the greatest minds in America?
No.
Or is he? Okay, I didn't think so. So why is he? So why is he in charge of NASA?
Yeah,
I know, right?
What's his qualification there? Like, I don't understand. Just because you sat on the board of Lockheed Martin. I mean, yeah, they make aerospace vehicles, but they're usually just to bomb poor brown people in the Middle East. It's really not usually to go to space. And Relativity Space, it's kind of a newer company. And for those who remember my early reporting on CAA, the name Michael Kives definitely rings a bell.
Yep.
One of the people that blackballed donations to Tulsi Gabbard after she left the DNC in 2016, part of that infamous WikiLeaks email. And of course, Sean Colo, right? He was one of him, and I was talking to Niko about this the other day. I mean, there wasn't anything to report at the time. It was just something I had noticed. Like, man, it's funny how a TYT board member and Sean Colo, who was actually the primary funder for TYT's, infamous $20 million deal that they got. Katzenberg soaked up the spotlight, but he wasn't the primary investor. It was actually Colo and his firm. And so now you see them just linking up, man. Kives had left CAA at some point to start something called K5 Global, but it was very opaque. It was very shadowy. Nobody really knew what it was. And now we know what it is. It's a money managing firm, and it's also an investment firm.
Yeah.
Or it manages an investment firm. So, it's the spider web gets bigger. But but here's the thing though. What's going to happen? Is Relativity Space going to get a contract with NASA? Is Lockheed Martin going to get more contracts with NASA? Because I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Lockheed's already manufacturing certain parts to go in the shuttles, like booster rockets and stuff like. I'm sure that they've got technology that we don't even know about, of course. But what would be more shady than, okay, we had a former advisor or a former board member of Relativity Space, and then now couple years later, say Relativity Space gets a big fat contract with NASA to start 3D printing a bunch of their stuff. By then it might fly under the radar, but it should be a big red flag, right? Yeah. I mean, this is something that's like another one of those conflict of interest things that at first look mundane. A lot of our reporting might just scroll by and be like, okay, that's a bunch of that's nothing important, and sometimes it's not, but it could mean something later. But here's the more frightening thing, guys, is like I got the idea of what happens when Relativity Space, or I'm sorry, what happens when Lockheed Martin learns how to 3D print rockets? Like we're totally fucked up then, right? I mean, because I don't like. So I mean, it's just something to watch. I mean, Biden. This is the trend for Biden's administration. Anybody that's been able to follow my reporting on their financial disclosures, as far as the cabinet members and stuff like that. I mean, look, it's like as the Who said in that song, "Meet the new boss, same as the old boss." It's nothing new. They are all corporatist tools, highly invested in the biggest companies that, just like Nancy Pelosi. The only difference is that these guys got to divest. Nancy Pelosi does not, which is really kind of odd, because and that's another thing I've noticed is like, so anybody nominated by the president to take a post in his cabinet or something like that, the United States, like their ethics agreements that they sign do require them to make a lot of divestments. And that's just not the case for U.S. congressmen. All you have to do is just tell the government what you have, and they're okay with that. Which is totally ass backwards. It should be that same way all across the board. And, and it's not just, like I said, we bag on Pelosi. Yes. There was a lot of hubbub about like Senator Burr, Perdue, Loeffler last year around the time of the pandemic. They were buying up a lot of, pandemic related stocks. But then we also had, like, I broke about Rokfin last year.
Yep.
And it was right. And look,
that was his wife, Robbie.
Oh, it was his wife. Yeah, sure. And he couldn't tell her what to do with her money, because married couples have no discussions about that kind of stuff whatsoever. Yes. And even to bring it up would be sexist as hell. But so John Kerry hit him from the left just a couple of weeks ago, because for those who don't know, Rokfin has a very wealthy wife, and they have multiple trust funds and multiple brokerage accounts that they are not run by the Khanna family. I'm almost positive they pay people to do all that stuff. But also John Kerry has a very wealthy wife. Her name is Teresa Heinz. She's the heiress of the Heinz food family fortune.
Never buy Heinz
and
ketchup again.
They also have so much trust funds and accounts, and as you would imagine, as a billionaire heiress would have. But somehow they managed to divest from over 400 different companies a couple of weeks ago, as required by their ethics agreement. Somehow John Kerry talked his wife, as sexist as it is, into divesting from these companies, and yet Rokfin is still sitting here like buying in General Dynamics and a bunch of defense companies. I mean, my initial report was right at the crash. Whoever was managing his money is a shisty dude, right? Because they were like, oh, wait, we're not only are we having a market crash, but there's a global pandemic. Let's buy a shit ton of Pfizer and DuPont that make PPE. This ought to make Mr. Khanna a lot of money and a hell of a commission.
He's
for
a
the guy running
progressive,
the account.
Khanna. He's a member of the Progressive Caucus.
So I guess the point I'm trying to make when I bring that up is that this is not a partisan issue. This is definitely something that happens on both sides of the aisle, and it shouldn't be legal at all. Like this needs, but then again, you've got the people that are making the most money out of it, blocking changes to the rules so they can continue to make money.
Exactly.
Because look, if you change that rule, Nancy Pelosi is going to have to live off 174 grand a year, guys.
Right?
I mean, Jesus Christ, like how much ice cream, like you know how much ice cream she's going to have to cut out of her life?
That's what I'm saying. But people don't attack her because she's a Democrat. She's Team Blue, so you can't attack her for that reason.
And she's got the best PR team.
Real quick, I looked up from that Sludge article which members of Congress actually introduced that, and it's actually from Representative Spanberger, Abigail Davis Spanberger, a Democrat from Virginia, and originally it's she introduced an act. It's called Trust in Congress Act, and then when HR 1 came out, it was they tried to put it in there as a amendment to HR 1. So I was wondering if I saw any of the squad members in here that co-sponsored this or introduced it. So, and it's just Miss Spanberg, Mr. Roy, Miss Norton, Mr. Foster, Mr. Jones, Mr. Houlihan, Mr. Perry, Mr. Keller, and Mr. Wright introduced the following bill. So I don't see anyone from the squad there.
No.
Yeah.
And I remember AOC in the beginning of her term was going after like all the investment stuff, like making all this claims like, oh, why? How can Congress members own stock when they're legislating on
laws that
bills affect the stock, or they write the
they approve contracts,
the
money,
exactly. They write the money for these stock companies. So
yeah. It's awful. By the way, too, as well, one of the first articles you wrote, Robbie, was about Tulsi having friends in dark places, and Mr. Michael Kives was mentioned in that article that wrote the letter to on behalf of the Clintons about, you're done and you'll never get any money from us ever again.
In the WikiLeaks.
You'll never work in this town again. That's pretty much what it was.
The next one I want to talk about real quick is I wrote a tweet not a long time ago. I put it up. I called it the Regime Change Playbook, kind of just going out, just listing out how you try to manufacture regime change in another country by the United States. You put up this tweet. It's great. Here's how the government officials explode their net worth while in office. 1, place massive position in a prominent corporation, usually tech, defense, that sort of thing. 2, have said corporation receive massive government contracts. Maybe like, Tesla did, maybe like CrowdStrike, I don't know. Stock goes up, cash in that sweet, sweet profit. That's number 4. Number 5, repeat. Number 6, you leave office. Number 7, you start an NGO. This is awesome. Number 8, you start a consultancy lobbyist firm. Number 9, you consult or lobby for for prominent corporations. Number 10, friend becomes president. 10A, get a cabinet position. But if your friend, number 11, if no friends become president, run for office. Number 12, repeat. This is awesome. This is genius. I love this. You want to give me a little bit more insight to how you put this up there and what this is all about?
I mean, that's just something that I feel like I've picked up over the course of doing this reporting. It's the political industrial complex. That is a real thing. And we saw, like, again, the most expensive elections in history by far, just in 2020, and it's about to get even worse going forward. So yeah, I mean, of course, if you are in Congress, it's totally legal for you to place a massive position in a big company. And of course, tech companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, and defense companies like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, those are always safe bets to get multiple government contracts. They're always in the running every single year. Those companies aren't going anywhere anytime soon. So now that you've got that set up, I mean, yeah, of course. Now you're in Congress. You're in Congress, especially if you're in a position of power like Speaker Pelosi is. And then, of course, like I'm gonna write the laws that regulate these companies. I'm gonna make sure that I'm saying the right things in public, but I'm gonna make it easy on these guys. And they're gonna lobby me. They've got people in my ear all the time. And here's the thing, about when we go back to the insider trading, like, is it or is it not? For anybody else, it would be, because you have to realize that these people are in rooms that we'll never be able to have access to, talking to people that we'll never meet about things we'll never know about. So there's really no way to know what they have or have not been told. And furthermore, is it beyond the realm of possibility for Nancy Pelosi to be in a room with a Microsoft executive or a Microsoft lobbyist and some people from the Ways and Means Committee that are working out different budgetary concerns regarding Microsoft, and then have Nancy Pelosi go home at night and over dinner talk to her husband about, yeah, we're working on this deal with Microsoft, and then have her husband the very next day go to work and buy a bunch of fucking Microsoft? It's not something that has to be like, this definitely happened. The fact is that it's 100% possible and easy and legal for it to happen, and none of those things should be. Yeah. And but to get back on track, like, yeah, I mean, after you leave office, you got to make money somehow, right? All that insider trading isn't going to sustain you forever, right? So you of course you start lobbying. You use all your old contacts. Hey, let me get a job at an old lobbyist firm just for a few years until a few buddies of mine feel like running for office. And then whenever they run for office, you consult for them, and you get even more money. And then if they win, then you get to work for them, or you get to lobby them. Or if they become president, like you said, hey, let me get a cabinet position, make me director of NASA. I'm just as qualified as Bill Nelson, so why can't I be director of NASA? I was a good friend. And if you lose, well, fuck it, I'll just run myself, because there's nothing like making money off of the backs of people that can't work. But we can still convince them to give donations. And even if I lose, I'm going to be like a celebrity politician now, and I'm going to be able to work anywhere I want to. And in a couple of years, when the heat wears off, I'll just run for Senate or run for Congress, probably get elected, and then start the cycle all over again. That's how Nancy Pelosi is making money. That's how everybody in DC makes money. It's the most corrupt place on earth. And it's just getting worse, because there's literally nobody out there even attempting to put forward any real solutions. I mean, look, that the clause or the act by Spanberger would have been a fantastic one, but she had to have known going in. And politicians do this all the time now. AOC is the master of this. So, you go in and you say, okay, I've got this idea that's going to get me a hell of a lot of brownie points with my constituents and with like my base, but I know it's dead on arrival. Right. So I can introduce it, get the publicity, and whenever it fails, I don't really have it's fighting the battles you can't win just for brownie points. And that could have been what she was doing. Like, I like to think that maybe they're in it for the right reasons, but guys, no, I'm too jaded. I can't give them the benefit of the doubt. I think it's always obvious, like some PR
it's totally obvious.
Yeah, it's totally obvious at this point too. And a lot of people, have been focusing on how Biden would be better on climate justice than Donald Trump, the Paris Climate Agreement, etc. So you said that the EPA, though, was a joke, especially from their actions on the Colonial Pipeline. One of the biggest criticisms from the left about Trump was his ideology or his lack of action on climate change. Since Biden's administration has been in power, have you seen any changes at all regarding the EPA?
No. No, I haven't seen much change at all on anything regarding the climate, any kind of climate change legislation. Here's the thing, guys. Keystone was pretty much already dead because of a Supreme Court decision earlier during the Trump administration. Actually, I think it was in 2020 that it came down. But yeah, Biden took the easy political win there and killed it right before it became active, which if you want to get rid of a pipeline, that's the way to do it, because after they start pumping, it's damn near impossible to shut them down permanently. But after that, I mean, let's think about it. Before we get into the EPA part with the Colonial Pipeline, I mean, the Biden administration literally just backed a pipeline company in New Jersey in the Supreme Court using eminent domain to basically take land from the state of New Jersey to run this pipeline. Just like the Trump administration backed them in court the Biden administration is also backing them in the Supreme Court. So there's that. And then, of course, the decision to not shut down DAPL while they undergo their new environmental assessment, which, of course, was something that we all saw coming, because that's the difference. Keystone wasn't active. DAPL is, and that's a huge thing. But now, yeah, the EPA, whenever I reached out to them about the Colonial Pipeline spill, which, by the way, breaking right recently, just a couple of hours ago, I found out and reported that the 1.2 million number that we've been using to describe this spill is no longer adequate. It's bigger. It's bigger than that now. We don't have revised estimates. So how much bigger, we still don't know. But let's just say 1.2 plus million is one of the largest pipeline spills in the history, right? Just put it that way. But it dropped like 4,000 times the acceptable amount of benzene, which is a carcinogen, into the groundwater of a nature preserve in North Carolina. The EPA came out there and said, and I'm paraphrasing, I've recently put it up on my Twitter so you can read the statement for yourself.
Yeah, we have it up.
But basically they just said that, hey, the groundwater, the drinking water is okay. And, hey, Colonial Pipeline did some tests that said the air quality was fine. So, given those two things, I think we're done here. And they kicked it down the road to the state regulators. And then that was the last I heard of them, which is a complete joke. And in the article that I'm citing, when I actually said that they were a joke, it was in response to an article I had read where, it's obviously a puff piece trying to do some PR, trying to rehabilitate the image of a terrible agency. But then again, in the article, they said the EPA is kicking around this brand new idea of, really taking it to them, or maybe, I guess the word I'm trying to find is really starting and ramping up this new initiative on climate justice, guys. The EPA is finally about to get into the climate justice game. What the fuck have they been doing? Like, that's my biggest look. Here's my gripe, and it's always been like this, but especially now, is that the word protection is in your name, right? So tell me how you are protecting the environment if you only show up after it's been destroyed. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm sorry, the drinking water was fine, but you're not the Humanity Protection Agency. You're the Environmental Protection Agency, and there is a substantial amount of cancer-causing chemicals in the ground, in the environment. And not only did they do nothing to prevent it, but they did nothing afterwards and basically just said, hey, it's nothing to see here, guys. And they walked away. And that wasn't Trump's EPA that said that to me that day. That was Biden's EPA.
Exactly.
So, I mean, look, regulatory wise, we're in a bad spot. It can be fixed, but it's going to actually take some pressure on these politicians to actually do so.
Yeah, it's crazy because a lot of people said that aside from the immigration issue, the issue I heard second most was at least Biden will be better for the environment than Donald Trump was. Donald Trump was terrible. His EPA was ridiculous. Now here comes Biden, and what'd you say about that song again? Meet the new boss. Same as the old boss. And, it's a slap in the face for all the progressives who thought it would be the better of two evils with Joe Biden. You've shown us, Robbie, that's anything that's not true at all. It's ridiculous and stuff. But
I mean, look, quickly before you go, or before I have to go, but seriously, pipeline infrastructure is infrastructure. It's critical infrastructure, and it's national security infrastructure. You know how much money is being dedicated out of the $2.2 trillion Biden assessed it?
Zero.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question, because you've been talking about how this Colonial Pipeline is getting no attention to all the leaks it has everywhere along the pipeline by their own reporting, by their own standards. Why do you think this is kind of like not followed at all by the mainstream media, and like Standing Rock, which eventually they got on board with it and stuff? I mean, why aren't we hearing about this?
Because it can't be politicized. And I think that's the biggest thing about that. Look, I'm not hating on DAPL's the DAPL protests. I'm 100% for them. I've always said in a perfect world, I'd say no pipelines. In the real world, I'd say no new pipelines. So I'm definitely with that. We shouldn't be taking any land, especially native, indigenous, sacred land to run these things. But that's I hate to use this term, but it's a sexier story. You've got things you can politicize with DAPL, and they do it time and time again, these politicians, like they we actually had a couple that actually put boots on the ground. Like Tulsi Gabbard put boots on the ground. She actually went to the DAPL protests, right? And everybody else just kind of tweeted about it and fundraised from it. That's what Sunrise, and that's the thing, right? And this is one thing that I've learned. I mean, I knew this already, but like since I've been reporting, I've really driven it home, is that money talks. And if a politician can't turn an issue into either votes or funds, they're going to find something that they can do that with. And DAPL was just one of those things that they still talk about to this day. Colonial Pipeline happened in a nature preserve in a red state. Nowhere, there's no water contamination, there's no tribal land dispute, though I must say, guys, it's called the freaking Colonial Pipeline. What do you think they did to get the land to build it? So if that's your thing, there you go. I mean, but yeah, I mean, look, it's not a flashy story. It's a story that is basically a cautionary tale. The last time Dakota Access had an issue or had an incident reported to federal regulators was May 2020. It was about 180 gallons. Since that time, Colonial Pipeline has reported 10 such incidents to federal regulators, including the 1 point God knows how many million gallon spill, plus 9 other incidents. So here's what I've been trying to say, and here's the thing. Why is it, if you're a DAPL person, why should you care about Colonial? Because if we don't take action now, if we don't force politicians and regulators to take action now, not only tighten regulations and all that stuff on the government front, but actually hold Colonial Pipeline up in front of not only the entire country, but all of the other pipeline companies that operate in our country. We need to hold them up in front of them and say, hey, the way that these guys have been doing business, we cannot allow this anymore. We won't allow this anymore. And if you want to do business running a pipeline through our country, you will not be able to do it this way, or else we'll pull your license, which is something that, I mean, hell, guys, look, if as a former realtor, I should say, I know damn well that if I were to go around just neglecting my job as a realtor and cutting corners and having all of these mistakes at such a frequent rate, I would get my license taken away. Same for same for attorneys. They would get disbarred. So tell me why we allow pipeline companies to do this. It's totally within reason why we can. But if we don't do it now, in about 20 years, Dakota Access Pipeline is going to look exactly like it. And then you're going to have 2 problems on your hands. And look, the federal regulators recently just condemned this entire 5,500 mile pipeline as a ticking time bomb, public safety and environmental safety risk, with the potential for a catastrophic 1 million gallon plus leak possible at any point throughout the entirety of the stretch of the pipeline. And this thing crosses the Mississippi River. The next leak could already be happening right now, because Colonial didn't even find that leak. 2 kids on ATVs found it, because Colonial Pipeline's technology is not adequate enough to find a leak that way. So it could be leaking into the Mississippi River right now, and we wouldn't know for weeks, which would be a catastrophic thing. So again, I just reiterate, if we don't do something about Colonial now, in 20 years, DAPL is going to look just like it. If Line 3 from Enbridge, comes along, that's going to be a problem too. We're just going to keep destroying this place, but it can be prevented. There is things we can do to stop this. But it's just been one of those areas of policy that our government has just ignored for decades, and we're really starting to see the fruits of that non-labor now.
Well, Robbie, thank you for coming over. Just a last question. Did you, we've experienced people stealing our work. Who specifically was grabbing your work besides TYT? Like, who are the usual?
I'm not gonna go there, and I'm gonna tell you why. Is because I don't feel like starting any more beef right now. I feel like the people that maybe I've had an issue with, I've cleaned that up with in DMs, like privately. Here's the thing. Okay, so here's how I look at it real quick. I know that I'm not trying to take up too much more of you guys' time.
No, you're good.
But here's the way I look at it. I have a relatively small following, right? I mean, I just hit 10K on Twitter.
Congrats.
Which that's a new, but appreciate it. But that's a new development, right? Look, I'm just a dude on Twitter that, some people, it's hard to say what's being stolen or not, and so I always hesitate to use that link to say that. But I will say that I definitely have been on the front lines breaking stories for a long time now, and not getting credit for those breaks one way or another. That I will say. And I've seen it in publications like the Washington Free Beacon. I've seen it in other areas. I've seen individuals not, and like I said, it's hard to say that these individuals would steal, but it also was like, hey, I'm getting credit for a scoop, and it's like, you didn't scoop it. To me, a scoop is like, are you first? Did you break this or not? Like, did you get there first? So if you didn't get there first, I don't see how you could claim a scoop. But that's just me. Maybe it's just me being a rookie journalist, and I'm just not part of the club. But no, like, here's the thing, man. Like, I take it as like a compliment, I guess, in a way that so many mainstream journalists follow me on Twitter, and look, I had a couple of New York Times guys following me during the election, but after the election was over, I guess they didn't need my shit anymore, so they stopped following me.
Right.
So it's just fun like that.
Funny how that works.
It's funny that you bring it up. Like, it's so like the whale. Like, I hate unusual whales was I think the account that got a lot of the credit for the Pelosi break, right? Yep. Now, is that because, do I think that they stole that from me? I don't. I mean, it seems like that's kind of what they do on their website. I was just faster, it's just, I think it, and I appreciate the support that I've gotten from everybody that actually like, hey, no, Robbie did this. Because, we are independent journalists, and as much as I hate and that's the thing, like, I don't like being the center of attention. Like, I like the story being the attention. So like, it's hard for me to like say, hey, look at me, I did this. But I also realize that as an independent journalist, like, we need that in order to sustain what we're doing, you know what I mean? Because if we just kept getting left in the dust, it's going to collapse. But make no mistake, guys, like, do I think that there are people scooping my shit off my timeline? Absolutely. I know that there's been one instance where I did have another major journalist, or major in our circles. We had to have a discussion in the DMs because, I came out on Twitter and maybe said something that was misinterpreted. And that's my fault because I was pissed off about something.
You should be.
I made a mistake.
You have every right to be.
So then we took it off. We took it behind the scenes. I haven't talked to them since, but I feel like we've got it straightened out. Any miscommunications. But yeah, man, like, I see my shit everywhere else, and I'm like, hey, I broke that. But thanks for finally covering it like a month later.
Yeah.
When you broke it.
So where can people find you and your work, particularly your articles, besides Twitter?
Right. Well, I mean, I'm only really on two places. One's Twitter, and the other one is Rokfin. So I try to keep all of my work on Rokfin. But my handle is the same no matter where. Is ROBLETO Fire. That's Roblet of Fire. And before I get out of here, guys, I just always like to say, if any of your viewers have any free time tonight at all and just bored and need something to do, I encourage anyone that feels compelled to maybe just read for 5-10 minutes about the effects of autism, specifically in children, just so we can help build a more educated, accepting, and inclusive world for our neurodiverse brothers and sisters out there. But other than that, guys, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Of course, Robbie, you're always welcome.
You're great, Robbie. You're all heart. We love you, buddy.
Thanks, guys.